Thank you so much for watching. Before we get into it today, please make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this video, follow me on Instagram at felix.levine, and if you have something to say, please leave a comment. Now let's get into it. And we're live. Richard, thank you so much for taking the time today. I'm very excited to have you on my show.
Thank you, Felix. It's an honor to be here.
So I told you a few seconds ago, if there was maybe a little tidbit, a little something that the world doesn't know about Richard Bliss Brooke, entice me.
Well, two things came up that, I don't know, they're totally different, but one is I'm a helicopter pilot, and I didn't start that process until the age of 50. And I kind of wrecked my helicopter too once. And the other is I've been to Cuba 4 times. Those are the only two things that most people don't know about me.
How'd you wreck the helicopter?
It was a weight and balance thing. I landed it on my helipad at my house, which was a deck cantilevered off a pretty steep hillside. And I parked it too far back on the deck. So the back half of the helicopter was hanging over the hill. And as soon as I got out of the helicopter, so I shut it down, I got out, my weight unweighted the front of the helicopter. And I stood there watching it as it did this. And then it slid on the skids down the deck until the tail stuck in the hillside below it. And it just sat there. It was a very surreal experience.
And since then, have you gotten is that helicopter functioning? Is it completely?
Yeah, just a $20,000 2-month mistake. And fortunately, since the blades weren't turning, it's not considered an accident on my pilot record. It's more like in the same category as if a tree fell on it.
So, well, I love that story. Wasn't expecting that. So I want to start maybe a little bit from the beginning. Big shout out to Todd Armstrong who connected us, and I got your little blurb, of course, and I think one sentence really stood out to me, and I think is really cool for the people out there that aren't familiar with your story. I'm just gonna read it really quick because I think it's a cool little description. It says, he, as in you yourself, Richard, was only 36 years old when Success Magazine featured his journey from earning $3.05 an hour cutting chickens for foster farms to creating millionaires from his sales training and performance coaching. I guess for the average person out there, how does one go from earning $3.05 an hour cutting chickens at foster farms to high success in sales training and performance coaching?
Wow. Well, maybe two things. One, you're never going to make that kind of money at an hourly wage, right? So one is I moved from working at foster farms, which is linear income, working by the hour, to getting in a system where, not by employing people, but by building a sales organization. I got eventually about 30,000 people around the world that I got a very small commission on their sales. So I leveraged myself. Even if you make $500 or $1,000 an hour, your income is limited by the linear nature of your income. So I got in an income model where I could leverage myself. Like J. Paul Getty said it the best: I'd rather have 1% of 100 men's effort than 100% of my own. And the second half of that answer, Felix, is what I call transformational development. I assaulted on a regular basis for years and have ever since my limiting beliefs, my self-esteem, the way I see the world, my habits. I reinvented myself over and over and over and over and over and over again, because although there may not always be a direct correlation, there is a very strong tendency that you and I are going to earn in relationship to the service we provide other people. And the service we provide other people is in large part who we are as leaders, who we are as, thinkers, as servants, as, people with empathy and skills and coaching and vision and listening. And so to the degree that who you are benefits other people, perhaps allows other people to earn money or better their lives, then we can earn in accordance with that. So the guy who worked at the chicken plant was obviously only worth $3.05 an hour to Foster Farms, because that's what they paid that position, and I accepted the position. And so what I went about doing is becoming worth more. And then, of course, get in a system that recognizes the more. And so the short answer is transformational development. Just become somebody different every 90 days, every year, every decade. I have totally reinvented myself.
Now, at Foster Farms, when did you first start working there? How old were you?
I was 18, right out of high school. I did not go to college. I barely got out of high school. I wasn't stupid. I just hated school. And I grew up in the San Joaquin Valley of California, which is an ag area. And so if you don't get really good grades in high school, my parents weren't going to pay for college for me. I would have had to somehow, I don't know how I would have gone to college, but I had a 1.9 GPA. And so if you have those kind of grades and I wasn't an athlete. I mean, I played sports, but I wasn't that kind of athlete. You're going to end up back in the ag community in California. You're going to end up back on the farm, the ranch, or you're going to end up working probably in some kind of food processing plant, whether it's the Ragu Spaghetti Factory or Foster Farms or something like that. And so I worked there for 4 years. And Felix, I would have just retired from Foster Farms a couple of years ago, 40-year career at Foster Farms. Had they not, at the 4-year mark, arbitrarily, without asking me, changed their company policy. And this is a $1 billion company, 3,000 employees. They changed their policy company-wide that you couldn't advance any further than I already was without a 4-year college degree. And I started off cutting chickens, and within about 6 months, they saw I was really good at that because I was physically adept and worked hard. And, so they promoted me to a foreman. I got a blue hat. And then a year later, I got a white hat. And then they knocked me back down to a blue hat because I told my boss to go to hell in front of his boss, which is, that wasn't politically smart, right? But that was kind of give you a snapshot of who I was at the age of 20 years old. Not a very appropriate person. So when Foster Farms changed their policy, I was just like, wow. But I would have stayed there. I loved it. I loved the people. I loved the management structure. My role model was the guy who ran the chicken plant, and that would have been my life. I would have ended up in the bar every night like everybody else at Foster Farms, and go hunting on weekends. 40 years later, you retire on 1/3 of what was never enough for 40 years.
Did you ever, during that time, was the goal for you to get out? Did you want another, profession?
No, I loved it there. I planned on being there the rest of my career. I mean, the only reason I got out is they changed the policy, so I could not move up in that company. And I was, I didn't have any coaching on goal setting or career or anything like that, but I was just naturally goal oriented. I wanted to continue to move up in the management structure, and their policy blocked that. So I just became open to other opportunities. And so I ended up in business, which was a far cry from anything I would have ever chosen. I was not a business person, not an entrepreneur, not a people person, total introvert, didn't even like people, hated salespeople and like the whole concept of sales. I grew up on a remote ranch. I didn't grow up around other kids. And so I was very comfortable with animals and nature, but not other people. And the chicken plant kind of was well suited for that because everybody at the chicken plant spoke either Portuguese or Spanish. And so I didn't really have to interact with people, right? You just kind of bark orders, which is different than sales and leadership, right? Sales and leadership and entrepreneurship is not barking orders.
Now, how did you make that transition from being that, somewhat shy introvert or someone who didn't have much care to talk to, the people you're working with to now what you do, which is, communicate with people, and, you've been a keynote speaker in a lot of places. So to become more communicative and, I guess less introverted, maybe you're introverted in personal life, but, less introverted, at least publicly.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of a weird sleight of hand. So a friend of mine, actually high school buddy, same guy that got me the job at the chicken plant, he had gotten involved in an opportunity, a sales business kind of opportunity. And he was very suited for that. He was very gregarious, outgoing, life of the party. Everybody was always listening to Steve. So if there was a party, 20, 30, 40, 50 people at a party, everybody would be listening to Steve. I would be over in the corner just listening to everybody and watching everybody. So he got involved in this business thing, and he wanted me to get involved in it. And I went and looked at it, and I don't know anything about this. This requires that I go out and sell and promote and talk to people and, wear a suit and all this kind of stuff that just wasn't me at all. So when I say sleight of hand, the business itself did not appeal to me at all. And it was a business that promoted, hey, if you do this, you can make a lot of money. That didn't even appeal to me. I really was just somebody who wanted to live a simple life. But when I say sleight of hand, the people that were involved in that business, the leadership in that business, the owner of the business, and some of the top lieutenants in that business portrayed a characteristic, a style that I'd never seen before, which we would now call mentorship or coaching or leadership. They showed a deep and sincere interest in me, which at the age of 22, my parents hadn't even shown a deep and sincere interest in me. Nobody else had shown a deep and sincere interest in me. And they asked me questions nobody'd ever asked me before, like, what do you want to do with your life? Who do you want to be? What do you like about yourself? What would you like to change about yourself? If you could live anywhere in the world, where would you want to live? And I'm thinking, what? I mean, I live in Livingston. It's 11 miles from where I grew up in Merced. I guess somewhere between Livingston and Merced. I don't know. What are you talking about? Live anywhere in the world? I just didn't have that kind of viewpoint. And, for listeners, this was 1977. There was no internet, right? Things were a little simpler back then. But what caught me, Felix, were individuals who had spent their business career developing other people. They were business people that realized that how you succeed in business is by developing people. And you can develop pretty much anybody that is willing to be developed. You can coach anybody that's willing to be coached. And I was very coachable. So even though I was stubborn and I was an introvert and I was negative, I kept showing up for the coaching. I kept showing up for the conversation. I actually looked at this business opportunity every day for 3 weeks before I got involved. And what kept me coming back was curiosity. So I've always been curious. And even though I've not always been coachable, I've always wanted to better myself. And so I just found a group of people that were very successful in business. I liked the way they talked. I liked the way they walked. I liked the way they moved in the world. I liked the way they interacted with other people. They had great confidence and self-esteem, but at the same time, they had peace and they had power. And I wanted that. So I paid attention to them. And they were so attractive that they overrode my objection to their business model. So I got involved in the business model really just so I could stay in their presence, stay under their tutelage, if you will. And it took 2.5 years for them and their systems and personal development and, you know, all of that stuff to mold me into somebody that was willing to talk to other people, listen to other people, not bring my farm and ranch mentality to the people business. And, you know, it worked.
Do you think that ultimately, if you hadn't had that experience working at the chicken farm, that, you know, you would have the life that you have today? Do you think that there was, are you grateful for those years that you spent on that farm?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it didn't prepare me to be in the people business, but there was a certain level of confidence and peace and authenticity that came with being raised on a ranch. You know, when you're raised on a ranch, you don't grow up trying to impress the chickens or the horses, right? But I think maybe when you grow up around other kids, there's all that dynamic of, you know, who's the most popular and, you know, how do I impress these kids and how do I keep up with the Joneses, right? I didn't have any of that. So I think I grew up with some inner peace. You know, the fact that I worked at Foster Farms did not actually prepare me to succeed in business at all. But as you know, Felix, you know, with every adversity comes the seed of equal or greater benefit. And some people might see the chicken plant experience for me as an adversity. It actually was my greatest asset. I have made a significant amount of income and created a significant amount of wealth from the chicken plant story.
How so?
People love the story. In fact, I interviewed the editor of Success Magazine after he interviewed me. And one of the questions I asked him is, why me? I wasn't the most successful person in business. I wasn't the most successful person in my profession. The article was on my profession. They chose me out of, I don't know, 10 million people. And I wasn't the most successful person in the profession by far. And I asked him, why me? And he said, we really like that chicken plant angle.
Hey, I mean, it's true. And I think I think it also is inspiring just because, you know, I mean, granted, it was a slightly different time, but not needing to go to college or not needing to go the conventional route to have success for me is always inspiring whenever you hear it, because, you know, I think a lot of kids and the way our society is formed these days is to make sure you do, you know, A, B, C so that you can get to D. But, you know, I think you're a great example of how that's not the case. But I also want to bring you back really quick to something you said earlier with regards to coaching and being coachable. When you do your coaching and when you, I guess, evaluate a human being, what are some of the big characteristics that you look for to see if they are in fact coachable or not?
Well, you give them assignments, right? That's probably the best way in developing business people and leadership around me. I tend to not pay very much attention to what people say. and pay a great deal more attention to what they do. So a lot of people will show up and say, I want this, I want that, I want to make more money, I want to be successful, whatever, right? People are pretty loose with their lips, but they don't necessarily back it up with action. And people make promises all the time. And, it's like, people are, like a quote that I have is, people are absolutely unequivocally committed right up to the moment they're not. Right? Right? They're committed to one thing right up to the moment they commit to something else. And so people are fickle in that way. And so when I'm working with somebody, I give them assignments. So, go read this chapter, or listen to this, podcast, or, do this exercise, write some things down, or, go make 3 sales calls. And tomorrow let's talk about who you talked to, what they said, what you said. And the people that come back and have actually completed the assignment are people I continue to coach, whether they're paying me or not. And it's crazy. I'm sure you've experienced this, how many times people will throw money and somehow think that throwing money at a course or coaching or business opportunity is going to result in success. They don't do the work, but they'll throw money at it.
Right.
So even throwing money at something is not action. It's not the action that produces results. The only thing that produces results is, what's the strategy that the coach is going to help you with that's going to produce results, and are you willing to do that?
And what do you think? What do you think separates the good, quote unquote, clients or people that you coach from the great ones?
Good from great. Well, just about everything in my career, Felix, has boiled down to motivation. That's my jam, and internal motivation, not the kind of motivation that is created by pursuing being number one or winning a contest or setting records or that kind of stuff. But in my experience, the people that live great lives, which doesn't necessarily mean they advance the highest in business, or they make the most money, or they have the most sculpted body, or, right? They don't always check all the boxes on the traditional, this is the definition of success. My definition of success is like internal peace. Like, am I at peace with who I am and what I'm doing with my life? And so the work that I do with people is develop that inner fire, that inner direction, that find that true north. Like, who are you? And who are you now? Who do you want to be? Why do you want to be that person? And if you were to be that person, how would your life be different? What would you do with your life? What good would you do with your life? What are you afraid of? What are you passionate about? It's 1,000 questions. And the people that I find that go from good to great are the people that are willing to let go of an addiction to proving that they're the best, or having to set the records, or having to win all the contests. It's kind of an interesting irony that when we have an addiction to winning, the foundation of that addiction is actually a story, a personality defining story, that we're somehow not enough. And we need to spend our life proving that we are. So the people that can go in and reinvent that core childhood story and adopt a belief, a core belief, that they are enough, that they are loved, that they do matter, that they are worthy human beings, they find a greater peace and power in living their lives, which includes accomplishment. They move into accomplishment with, not the frantic addiction the fear of losing, or the fear of doing something wrong, or the fear of having somebody else outdo them. All that kind of external neurotic motivation burns people out, does not endear them to society or their teammates or their family. People that I find go great are the people that find authenticity and inner peace. And with that comes great power.
Do you think that most, I guess, young, aspiring, successful people, if you will, need some sort of mentor or coaching in their life?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. And the word need would, that's relative to what you want to accomplish, right? So let's say I'm 18 years old and I want to accomplish something. Well, if I already know how to do it, and if I'm already the person that will do the work, that can manifest the result, then I guess I don't need coaching. But coaching is, by definition, is really designed for people who are taking on something that they don't have the ability to achieve. They're taking on a project, a goal, an accomplishment, a reinvention of themselves, and they recognize, you know what, I've never done this before. I don't know how to do it. And the people that have the conversation, I don't want any help. I'm gonna do it myself. I'm gonna figure it out. That's also coming from trying to prove something, right? Those are people who they're trying to prove they don't need help. They don't need coaching, which comes from a lack of self-esteem, right? Why would we have to prove something unless we had the story deeply embedded that it needed proving?
Now, what do you think is the process also for someone out there who's listening who might be on the fence about either how to find the quote unquote right coach or right mentor? What are things for them to look for in, because I'm sure that sometimes it might take a couple different people to find your right match.
Yeah, not only a couple different people to find the right match, but then you might find yourself doing that process every year or two the rest of your life. Because as you evolve, you may need a different coach. So, like, one really important criteria for me is I won't hire a coach unless they have a coach.
Do you have a coach?
For sure.
Are you allowed to say who those people are?
Well, my primary coach right now is a guy named DeWitt Jones.
Okay.
He doesn't coach for a living, but he is a coach. I mean, it's just who he is.
What are some of the things that you at this point in your life look for and in your coaching?
It just kind of what I was just talking about earlier, where what he supports me on the most is staying present to what's the most important thing to me and not getting caught up in competition. So I am by nature a competitive person. I like to achieve things. I like to be the best. I like to accomplish things. And I spent my whole life and career developing an alternative source of power to that, which is more of a peaceful warrior, more of an authentic approach. And so, one of the conversations that DeWitt and I have on a regular basis is, why am I pursuing that objective? Why am I trying to accomplish that? Like, what's the payoff for that? And what DeWitt listens to is the authentic nature of my response. Am I coming from trying to prove something? Am I coming from trying to, be number one? Which I'm not suggesting that people that operate, with those kind of goals and that kind of motivation are bad people. My experience is just that when you do things for external motivation, for recognition, for setting records, for winning, for dominating. Those people don't live great lives. They get burned out and they alienate people around them because the most important thing to them is being number one. And if the most important thing to me is being number one, then everybody around me has to be number 2 through 100, which does not make for a beautiful community, right? Even a profession. So I'm in a very competitive profession, and I know who the number one people are in our profession, and I would not trade places with them. They live miserable lives. Why? Because their whole life is about beating everyone around them. So they really don't have any authentic friends because nobody wants to be around them because it's always about being number one, right? It doesn't matter if you're in business or you're in there's 6 buddies that are hanging out playing pool. We don't enjoy being around the buddy who always has to beat everybody.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it.
Have you always had this sense of being okay or being at peace with yourself? I mean, I think that's one of I've only talked to you for about 30 minutes now, but I think that's one of the coolest takeaways that I've gotten is just, especially you're in a very highly competitive profession, as you said, is to just be at peace with what you bring to the table. You know what you bring to the table. You don't need to prove yourself. Have you always been that way, or is that something that you had to work on?
I think I had a piece of that that came from, growing up in solitude and growing up on the ranch and the farm. But what got triggered is when I moved off the ranch and the farm and into business, and business is very competitive. And the kind of business that I was in was a sales business, right? There's all these contests and all this ranking and all these awards and, that just kind of triggers all your competitive nature, and we get caught up in that. So, one of the things I noticed about you, Felix, and watching your story, because I've been studying you, is, wow, you chose a very authentic path in developing your brand and your podcast. You do it in a very authentic way. And I'm sure you have goals and, you want to achieve great things with your podcast. But I see you doing it in a very authentic way. And, that's hard for people because what we tend to do is if we have a goal of, okay, I want to be number one, well, we tend to look at, well, how does number one do it? And everybody tends to want to copy the way number one's doing it. And what we could get from really good coaching is, hey, just do you, right? Because if you can perfect doing you, a tribe will beat down your door, an authentic tribe. Will it be as big as number one's tribe? Well, maybe not. But if becoming number one causes you to be inauthentic, to try to be someone else all the time, you're never going to have peace. You're never going to have joy because you're going to be living a lie. You're going to be dressed in clothes that you just don't feel comfortable in. And then you're going to be serving clients that you don't really even want to serve. You're going to be speaking messages, interviewing guests. You're going to always just have a little bit, just going to be a little bit off. And you don't have to be very much off in life every day. If you take a helicopter off from point A to point B, and that GPS is just off 1 degree, well over a decade, you're going to end up on a different planet. Right? So being off just a little bit in our authenticity, what I call true north, and everybody has a different true north. And how I would find that out is I would ask you 1,000 questions and I would just listen for the truth. And and support you in staying grounded in that truth. That's what my coach does for me. That's what I do for other people, because one of my first mentors said this, and I didn't really understand it when he said it, but I certainly have lived by it, and I understand more about it every day, that all personal power comes from self-honesty. Like just telling the truth and then living out of that truth. And so many of us live a lie because we're addicted to being someone we're not. And I know that sounds a little contradictory around transformational development, but it's not. And authenticity is the way you and I become great and even greater every year and produce the best quality gifts for the people that we serve.
Well, hey, first, I appreciate the kind words. Thank you for that, because that means a lot. I mean, I think you're right, especially for myself, who's young and still trying to grow a brand. I think trying to be the Joe Rogan of the world is not the right way to do it, and nor will I be the Joe Rogan of the world. But I think it's the best. I'm doing what I like to do and how I like to do it. After, if there's adjustments along the way, then we make those. But that means a lot. So thank you for that. And also, I think speaking of authenticity, I'm wondering, when you're working with clients and you say, I asked them 1,000 questions, what are some of those big questions you perhaps ask, or some of your go-tos that might trigger that truly authentic response?
Questions like, what do you long to do, Felix? What would you love to do? Who would you love to be? Where would you love to go? What would you love to have? But most importantly, who would you love to be if the world gave you permission, if the world celebrated it? And the first part of the world we're going to talk about is your parents. So, and I would dive a little deeper into that and ask you, who did your parents insist you become? And we would flush that out. And then I'd follow that up with, okay, is there any of those things, any of those values, any of those beliefs, any of those philosophies that you ever imagine you'd rather do something different? And in crazy simple terms, a lot of our authenticity is lost because we don't have the courage to disappoint our parents. So right? I mean, you can everything from politics to religion to money philosophies to who we marry, what we eat, what kind of truck we drive, what kind of iPhone or what kind of smartphone we use, right? I mean, the religions and politics is probably the biggest. But if you just think about how influential our parents are, why is that? Well, because by the time they have us, they're fully baked in their beliefs. They're, 20, 25, 30 years old. And we're like 1 day old, 1 month old, 6 months old. We don't have any beliefs. We don't have any preferences. We don't drive Fords over Chevys when we're 6 months old, right? We don't vote liberal or conservative. We don't even have a religion, contrary to what some people might believe. We don't. And so here we are, just this open book, right? Blank pages. And who writes the code? Our parents. And who are we to question the code when you're 6 months old? We don't have any basis to question it. Just gets fully imprinted. And then, one of the cool things I like to show people is, okay, you can even do this in a chronological genealogy chart. So let's look at your parents, Felix. How old were they what era did they grow up in? Now, you're young, so your parents are probably even younger than me. I'm 65. But we could just look at the era in which they grew up, right? So my parents grew up in the 30s and 40s. And in that era, Felix, cigarette companies hired medical doctors to endorse smoking cigarettes. Medical doctors recommended that pregnant women smoke certain brands of cigarettes.
That's crazy.
Right? So that's just one of 100 crazy things, right? Now go back to their parents who were raised in the late 1800s. What did they believe? That we would consider pure insanity today. Go back to the early 1800s. What did they believe? Now we're talking about criminals, right? Well, even in North America, we're talking about anybody that was in the 1800s in North America. They created genocide without even thinking about it. They just marched their way east to west and killed every Native American they came in contact with, right? And I'm not suggesting Native Americans didn't reciprocate, but these are the people that we listen to. So part of becoming authentic is, it's not like I coach a lot of 17-year-olds, but when you're 27 or 37 or 47, you have enough life experience to be authentic, to have some authentic views on things. And that doesn't mean that you wouldn't choose your parents' views. What it means is there are some things that if you had total permission, you would pursue, you would be. And, some of those are big blocks of philosophy like religion and politics. And some of them are very subtle, stylistic. How do you listen? How do you talk? How do you move in the world? What's your level of empathy? Where do you stand on diversity? And, all of these things, again, it just doesn't take a lot, right? 1 degree. So in all these questions, Felix, what I'm looking for is to move people maybe just 1 degree. Because over the next 10 years of living a life 1 degree more authentic, dramatic difference.
Now, I have a quick question to just to wrap things up. Do you ever think about, hopefully you have a lot of, I was looking in the little blurb that I was sent, a lot of great hobbies that you like to do. You live in Hawaii, correct?
Yes.
Hopefully many, many more years of long, healthy life. But do you ever think about the legacy that you hope to leave on this world, the print? Because I think that, in your coaching and even in your talking to me right now and a lot of things that I'm going to hold on to, you're influencing lives and you're I imagine changing a lot of them and inspiring people. Is that the legacy you hope to leave? Is there a separate legacy you hope to leave? What do you hope ultimately, people will remember you as?
Yeah, good question. It's not for my accomplishments because they're all relative, right? My next door neighbor is Larry Ellison. He lives like 200 yards behind me. He's worth $85 billion, right? So anytime I ever think I've done something, right? I don't know. It is, I have spent my life, Felix, honoring the gift of my primary mentor. So I told you about this group of, they were all men, but this group of men in this business who mentored me. And there was one in particular that I resonated with. And what I resonated the most about him is his vulnerability and his authenticity. And he was immensely powerful. There wasn't anything weak about him at all. And I had the benefit of his coaching for 9 months. And then he, oddly enough, took a very much needed vacation to Hawaii and got hit by a rogue wave and drowned. Wow. And the moment I found that out, I quit. I quit the business. I quit personal development. I quit everything. And it was, just for a moment. But the reason I quit is the way I had everything put together is as long as I had Kurt Robb, that was his name, as long as I had Kurt Robb to mentor me, then I might make it someday. And it was really the relationship I had set up was such that I dishonored the gifts that he gave me every day, because he told me many, many times, he says, you already know everything you need to know to be successful. You already have it. Just go implement it. Just go do what we've talked about doing. And there's such a huge gap between knowing and doing, right? And so about 20 minutes after I quit, because he died, I had this epiphany. And I think we can all look back on our lives and maybe pick out 3 or 4 defining moments where things happened or insights came to us or somebody said something. This was an insight. Nobody said anything to me. It was an insight. Maybe it came from God. I don't know, right? And the insight was basically, if you quit, you have dishonored every gift this man ever gave you. And even though it was 9 months of gifts, he gave me a lot in 9 months. If you quit, you dishonor. The way to honor is to replace Kurt Robb, not be Kurt Robb, but contribute what Kurt Robb had contributed to me. And so that was 1978. And from that moment, I have dedicated my life to coaching other people. And so the legacy that I might leave is, I'm not delusional. Probably 99% of the people I've ever coached didn't remember a word I said, didn't do anything with it. But if a few people remembered a few words and moved 1 degree in their life, and a few of those people can pass that on to other people, that's legacy enough for me.
Beautiful. I love it. I love it. People can follow you on Instagram at Richard Bliss Brooke with an E at the end. Your website, Richard Brooke with an E at the end, of course, .com. Has all of the information about you, and if they want to get in touch with you, you have a bunch of different programs, books, podcasts, all that good stuff. They can find all of that out there, I believe, and they can even get in touch with you, I imagine. Is there anything else that you want to plug away for people where they can find you or, listen to more or get in touch with you?
I'm old school. The easiest way to get in touch with me is email, which is rb@richardbrooke.com. But I'm easy to find. But thank you, Felix. I'm very inspired by your vision and your authenticity and your success already. Todd spoke very highly of you. I watched some of your stuff. I watched your style. I watched some of the people. And you're not Joe Rogan, and that's good. But the reason Joe Rogan is because he does Joe Rogan,
Yeah.
right? Unapologetically, and you're unapologetically doing Felix Levine, and I think that's super awesome. Congratulations.
I really, really appreciate that, and that really means the world. And again, thank you so much for taking the time. And I hope if you're ever in New York or I ever come down to Hawaii, we make it happen, and I get to see you. But thank you again for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Instagram at felix.levine. And if you have something to say, please leave a comment.